Yeah, well, I mean, all those other people didn't speak the language and stuff, but it seemed like you guys were at a greater disadvantage because America was about to go into a war with the country that you came from. So people weren't all happy about.
The Germans and Italians were despised during World War II, as were the Japanese. Three major, the countries that fought against the United States. The people here suffered by it. We didn't suffer as bad as the Japanese, nor the Germans, nor the Italians, but we suffered in our own way because we were not mistreated so that we were physically mistreated. We were mentally mistreated. A lot of people just kind of scorned you and looked at you awkwardly and so on down the line. And fortunately, though, Youngstown was loaded with immigrants.
What about the Statue of Liberty?
The statue brought tears to everybody's eyes the moment they saw it, because you leave Europe with an image of the United States which is not quite true. The land of plenty, the streets of gold, and everybody is somebody, and so you came to a land of freedom, because I remember fascism, and I remember the fear that Mom had of the black shirts. They used to roam the countryside, and a lot of people got killed quietly, and nobody ever made a boo about it because that's what the black shirts behaved. And their idea to take control of people was fear, and it worked beautifully. Fear ruled everyone. The moment they walked on a black shirt, everybody ran away.
Who were the black shirts?
The black shirt was a fascist. They wore black shirts, and that's what they were called, because the Germans also wore black shirts. They were imitating the Germans. And but most of them were the scoundrels, they were the low life, and the people who couldn't make it in any other way. They became bullies, and everything else that you want out of life. So the women, because most of the men were in the United States, you want to remember that Pajantro lost most of its male population through immigration. And so 60-70% of the people in Pajantro were women. Another 15 to 20% were elderly men who could not go anywhere. They were too old to go anywhere, and Valence was made up of children. So able-bodied men were few, and so the fascist reigned without worry about being opposed by any man that would catch them outside and do them in, per se, so that the fear would go both ways. They had free hand. They did as they pleased.
The fascists bugged Uncle Pat, didn't they, to try to get them?
Oh yeah, he was getting of age where they wanted him to enlist, and Mom stopped it and fought it. And Mom delayed too long to leave the country because Pop had been after her for many years to leave, and she didn't want to leave. Grandpa was still alive, and she knew that he didn't have long to live, so she was caught between staying there and take care of him or coming here. Fortunately, he died in 1937, and the moment he died, we left.
Oh.
Oh, he died. Wait a minute, he didn't die in 30. He died in 36.
36.
36.
Because then you were going to leave, but then Grandpa or
No, Uncle Pat. Yeah,
problem.
we delayed 6 months because of his burn.
What about leaving? Didn't you have to sort of sneak out?
We left in the middle of the night without starting the engine, and that's to prevent the black shirts coming at us and trying to stop us. That was the whole idea, and for not to leave. And legal or illegal, they didn't care, for whatever the reason. And of course, the Carabinieri to make sure that all our documentation was right and so on down the line. And our time schedule was tight. We had to be in Naples quickly, otherwise we weren't aware how close they came to closing the port. I think shortly we left, the port was closed and nobody could leave anymore. I said, we were here, and within a few days after we were here, Pop told us that that was it. I think the Rex was the next ship to leave, and after that, nobody else left. Well, after Grandpa died, there was no reason for us to be there. And of course, then the fear got to be tremendous. She was fearful every time she saw a carabinieri or a black shirt, not knowing if they're coming down, because they confiscated everything we had, including her wedding ring. They took everything. None of it was ever returned.
And then the Germans came and occupied Pajenta.
Well, we went there when they did.
Bernadette-
Pajenta was occupied by Germans, yeah.
Yeah, Bernadette was telling stories about how they had to hide out in the woods. For,
Oh, yeah, for many, many weeks, yeah. Because they kill wantingly. If they don't like you, they'll kill you. They don't have to have a reason. They didn't like the color of your hair or your eyes, or you struck them as an odd fancy. They'd pull out their Luger and boom, you're dead. Somebody have to come and haul you away. I mean, it wasn't. It was that much like the Jewish people got killed. They didn't discriminate by who they killed. They were the power. You couldn't touch them. The underground did. The underground killed a lot of Germans in Sumon, but every time they did that, the reprisal was even heavier.
Who was the underground?
The Italians.
The Mussolini Italians?
No, the real Italians.
The real Italians.
Like the real Germans that, they didn't want to fight the war, or the French underground.
What made Grandpa leave back in 1921? He left in 21, right?
He left in 1921 because he saw no future in Pajenta. And his buddies were saying, let's go to America. This is where our future is, because jobs are there, money is there, we can, so on. I believe I was never told this, but my belief is that Pop came here originally like Grandpa did. See, our grandfather, Mom's grandfather, earned his money in the United States here in the 60s, 1800s, and late 1800s, in Colorado, in the mines.
So did that, because Lucy Morningstar's
Right.
mom,
Right.
Conchetta,
Right.
lived
That's where they
here.
were. They lived in,
That's where all the kids are born in New Mexico.
right, New Mexico. That's where they went. So he
Grandpa,
earned,
but that's a different family, actually, because you're saying Grandpa.
because I
so
remember
Grandpa.
Agostinelli. Yeah, but you see, they were all from Pajenta, so they knew each other.
Yeah.
Okay? They always run in groups. Grandpa, when I was a child, I vaguely remember him trying to explain to me what an Indian was. And bow and arrow. And I was trying to understand what this bow and arrow meant, and he drew it and tried it, to tell me, and about Indians, the American Indians. That's how I knew that he was in that area. Then we went, in Chicago, there was a family that when Pop came back from Arizona, when I sent him back, and I went up there with him to go visit these people, they told me that Grandpa, had been in New Mexico and had earned the money and went back to Italy, and then he had the funds to buy the land and do what he was doing.
That was Grandpa's father.
Agostinelli, yeah.
Okay.
Because there she was somebody, here she was nobody. But even though when she came here, her somebody still prevailed. She learned the language on her own, went to night school, read the newspaper from page to page. I used to watch her every time we had finished dinner. She would put the paper, she'd get herself a cup of coffee, put the paper on the table after everything was washed and done, and she would start from the first page and go all the way to the end. Because I asked him many times, I says, how do you know what you're reading? He says, don't belittle me. He says, every third word is Italian. And I looked in the paper and I said, by God, it is. Because we're a Latin-based language. And so from that word, she knew what the word in front meant and what the word after meant. And so she learned between school and doing that. In a few short years, Mom was manageable in English. Not expert, but manageable. She did her first grade there and then went to St. Anne's. Both her and I went to St. Anne's, parochial school.
Yeah.
But I was 2 years ahead of her. So, I was a little further ahead.
She said she remembers a nun there.
She was fearful through whole school. She was so fearful of everything. And I have to be around her all the time because she was afraid to come alone. I wouldn't let her walk home alone. And I would make sure that, at her class to pick her up, take her home and so on down the line. But the trip and Italy had embedded in her the seed of fear. And that fear continued with her. Mm-hmm.
What was it about it that made her fearful?
General things, not specific. Nothing to do with the hospital, the way things worked, around there. And But it was also her nature. She was a little bit on the timid side.
Yeah.
Okay. I used to jump at everything. I would be considered, the fool that jumps in where angels fear the thread. That's me. Yeah. Believe it or not, that's Tony.
I do believe that. Yeah, that. Yeah, that's a cute picture. It's a cute photo.
Those two caused me nothing but headaches. God Almighty. Yeah, that's at our first communion.
Did you see these pictures, Dave?
Literally, well, some of these older ones.
Yeah.
Literally, Lou and I started life together, and we all this 70 some odd years we've been together. I don't know of any person that knows me better than that person.